Hey, what is going on, guys? Welcome to the AV Experience. We're excited to have you. We're going to have some fun tonight talking about what is a house curve. We're going to just hang out just for a few minutes and catch up on what's been going on in our life. And then we'll jump into the question. And then if you have questions regarding home theater, drop those in the chat. We'll get to those after we talk about what is a house curve. Jonathan, what is up, man?
Hey, brother. Nah, not a whole lot. The weekend's winding down. Off tomorrow,
Yeah.
so it'll be a refresher. I had family over. We had 17 people in the house, so it's been a busy weekend.
Oh,
Celebrating late Christmas, but it was nice. Really, really nice.
very cool, man. It's
Got to
always
use
good to
some
have.
theater. Some we played some games on the theater, watched some like YouTube tracks and stuff. Everyone got some enjoyment out of that, so that was nice.
Right. Now, were there anybody that came over that had not really experienced your home theater?
No, not really. I mean, my family's all been here several
They're
times.
all kind of close.
Yeah.
I didn't know if like anybody was flying from out of, state or whatever. And
No, not this time. It's my side of the family, so they're all from mid-Missouri type area.
okay, so locals. We just got my father-in-law. He came in today. He's from Norway, so he came.
Long trip.
Yeah, he texted Jessica last night. He's like, "Hey, I'm in the hospital. Come pick me up." I'm like, "What the heck?" So he dislocated his shoulder. He was out working on a his dad's place and fell through like
Oh no.
it's like a porch, kind of basically like a deck. It had some rotten wood and he fell through and jacked up his shoulder. So he's gonna stay with us for a couple days. But yeah, man, it's been a fun weekend, nice and relaxing. I really didn't do anything Saturday or Sunday. Well, I take it back. I was sharing with you, my wife and I had an amazing dinner last night. We went out. We had a sweet family that gifted us a gift card. Really nice gift card to one of our local steak restaurants called Burn Steakhouse. So it's a 2-month waiting list on this place. So we reserved it a long time ago. As soon as we got the gift card, we was like, let's book this thing. And some of them, Ivan said he saw it on my Facebook, but it was just a fun time, man. We had, I got a combo of a Wagyu, so 4-ounce Wagyu, 4-ounce filet, and then a 4-ounce Delmonico steak. That was $150. Like I said, fortunately, we had a really nice gift card that easily covered that. And so it was just super cool, very kind of them. And then also they take you can, after your dinner, you can ask them if you can get a tour of the kitchen and then also their wine cellar. So we went through their kitchen. The kitchen is just huge, man. This place is massive and it's a live kitchen. So you got to stay in a single file line. They take maybe 6 people, like 3 couples through at a time. You have a waiter, not really a waiter, I guess one of their employees, give the tour. And we found out from our waiter, he's been there 29 years.
Wow.
And yeah. So this is one of them like fancy bougie restaurants. Once you get in, he was telling us kind of the process. You have to basically do your time, man. You don't get a silver tie for like years of working there, you have to go through extensive training. You have to go work on the farm. You have to take classes. You have to take all kinds of training. And then you have to follow people. And then you have to prove yourself. Then you have to take a test. And then if you're good, then you get the silver tie, man. So it was cool.
Wait a minute. What's the work on a farm? Are they like raising their own beef and stuff there?
Yeah, nice. It's local here. I asked one of the waiters and he said, yeah, we've got one over on, it's basically like North Tampa. I think North Tampa, somewhere in Tampa. So it's local. But yeah, it was just super cool, man. It was great. And so you finish with that, and then they take you down into the wine cellar. Wine cellar is pretty cold down there. But dude, there's they have 140,000 bottles of wine in the cellar.
Wow.
And I think they said, if I remember the number correctly, I think they have 400,000 at the warehouse, wherever that's at. So that's maybe kind of off site.
How many people are in this restaurant at a daily basis? Like, is it a huge restaurant?
It's a pretty big restaurant, but it's not like he said. I think the guy said not a lot of people actually get that wine down there. I mean, I think it's one of those almost like bragging rights. I mean, some of the wines are like $2,000, $3,000.
Oh my goodness.
Most of them are $100, $75, $100, $150.
Think how long 140,000 bottles of wine would last if you didn't even buy any more. If you sold 50 or 100 bottles a day. Yeah. Holy smokes.
Yeah, a long time. But it was, I think he was saying that they're like they have the biggest collection, maybe like in the whole US. I mean, it's massive, but it was just cool, man. I mean, I don't even drink wine, but I'm like, this is awesome, man. And then they had this huge bottle of wine. It's like I thing looked like a NOS canister on the back of a car, about that long, and it was in a glass case, got this real fancy, I don't know, crystal kind of thing next to it, but it's laying down. And he said, we can't sell it till like 2060 for some reason, like a licensing agreement with a company. And he basically said, it'll probably sell for a minimum of 200,000, but possibly more.
Whoa.
So, crazy, man. But it was
now,
fun.
are they making some of their own wine too at their farm, or is that all just imported from?
That I don't know. Yeah, I didn't, because again, I don't drink wine. I'm not a wine connoisseur, so I didn't know what the history was. But apparently, the original owner, I think he's probably gone on, but he loved wine, and so to have his own wine cellar and have everything there, it was pretty cool. And then from there, after you get a tour of that, then you go upstairs and they have a total separate dessert room. So you pay for your meal downstairs, then you go upstairs and you got to pay for another meal because it's, $25. I mean, it's not crazy expensive, but still $15, $20 for desserts. And so you get this little private booth. It's really cool. And it's a neat place, man. So if you ever get to Burn Steakhouse in Tampa, definitely fun. So, but we had a good time, man. And then we kept my grandson today. So life is good, man. Family's good. So let me say hi to some folks in the chat. Michael, good to see you. Finster, Chris is here. SRW 1000. Rob, what's up, buddy? Howard, Bruce, lots of folks in the chat, man. Schmuck, good to see you. Gene, Mike, bunch of folks. Tarhoya, good to see you guys, man. Well, cool. Like I said, we'll go ahead and jump into the topic. So we're talking about what is a house curve. And Jonathan probably is way more expert on this than but I at least know the general concept. And so I'd love to dive into that. And each week we just want to kind of hit a certain topic and let's cover it. And this was one that was suggested from the audience. So if you've got maybe even a topic at the end of the show, we'll just ask, hey guys, throw out some ideas and we may be able to cover that in a future episode. And so we're excited to have you here. So Jonathan, without further ado, let's talk about house curve. What is a house curve? Do we need one? And then I even found a website that kind of gave there's some issues with maybe having a house curve. So maybe we'll dive into that too and just have some fun with it. So give me some thoughts. What is a house curve?
Sure. I've never read it to be a single thing, like defined as exactly this or that. It's kind of just like almost a subjective preference that people apply, and it usually applies to the bass, but it doesn't have to only be that. Mm-hmm. So traditionally in the realm of like AVS forum and communications discussions there, you might say like, I have a house curve and I like running my bass 7 dB hot or 12 dB hot or whatever it is. And it means that you elevate basically the frequencies that the subwoofer covers in this just really generic sense. You elevate those frequencies up by that many dB over what a reference calibration would be. And it's just a preference. I like my bass to run a little hotter type thing. So I'm going to give myself a house curve. How you apply that house curve can vary. Some people like it completely facing up the entire way. So like a Fletcher Munchin curve, our ears are less sensitive to sound as you go to the lowest frequencies. Mm-hmm. So they'll just continually apply almost like an exponential graph to the lowest frequencies where they just really shoot up. Other people, like myself included, just like elevating the entirety of the bass up by whatever frequency amount you like. I like my bass about 9 to 12 dB hot. So starting with just where my subwoofer range changes, I just try to make that equal line just go all the way up, and it's just kind of a rise. So if you look at the frequency response from the high frequencies to low, it's kind of flat, and then it has that little curve up, and it goes to the left over there.
So maybe now this is just a graph I found online. So this is an actual frequency response. And then the little dotted line, the orange line, that's where it's kind of like what they call a target curve, correct? So this is where their room correction is going to try to make that line look like that. So it's higher on the left frequencies. You can see over the far left at the bottom, it says 20 hertz, 30 hertz, 50 hertz, 70 hertz. So those are your lower frequencies that Jonathan's talking about. So our ears tend to hear those frequencies like not as loud. Mm-hmm. So if you have a flat frequency response where 20 hertz is 75 dB, 30 hertz is 75 dB, all the way up to 100 hertz, 75 dB, it's going to sound kind of like anemic. It's the best way I can describe it.
This particular graph you have here is going to be really anemic because it looks like they're cutting away bass down there, unless this is just the main speakers in there.
Yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. So let's pretend like that actually just extended on up. Man, I can't do this backwards. Whatever.
Sure.
It kept going up. Yeah, it looks like they're probably cutting off for some reason. Oh, I guess it's because you can't boost those low frequencies.
It's probably a ported speaker of some sort, and it's undersized in the port, which is why you get that relatively huge bump at the port tuning frequency, and then it rolls off because it's probably
because they're not going to be able to, even if they drove that straight to the left, it wouldn't be able to boost that much.
Right.
So that's probably why they did that. But yeah, so the lower frequencies are just, they're kind of bumped up so that we feel that more, we experience that more. And so you saying that yours are 8 to how much?
I like 9 to 12 is kind of where I
Okay.
boost my bass, and the subjectivity in there, play with it from the subwoofer levels on my Marantz or my Denon in the past.
Yeah.
But in that range.
So guys, let me know in the chat too, while we're talking about this, let us know, number one, do you use a house curve? And if you do, what kind of boost do you have? So Jonathan's 9 to 12 dB. So, okay.
If you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen real quick. And I just did I just did a quick web search real quick, and we'll take a look at that.
Sure.
So tell me when you see it.
Yep, you're good to go.
So this is kind of more like my style, and I don't even like this rolling off down here. I try to have it pretty flat in my room down to as low as I can.
Okay.
But I do more of this style. So you can see like this is just the entire bass is elevated. And if we extend this graph onto the right, so here's 200 hertz. If you just imagine that just goes to the right, I like elevating the whole thing. Just like basically turning up the subwoofer trims on the AVR is how I do it. Now there's Harman curves, which would be something sort of more like this. Let's see if I can make that larger. And a Harman curve effectively has 2 roll-off periods. So they keep the bass a little high, and they lower it around 500 hertz or so up to down to maybe 1,000 or 2,000 hertz, and you roll it off again. And it's like almost like a 2-tiered platform thing. I've played with Harman curves. That's what Harman has decided in their research people like the most generically, like just in general. I don't traditionally like that. We've talked about that in the past. I kind of like smiley face EQ. Everyone has their own preferences for that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, that's a house curve. When you're intentionally modifying the EQ, like this might be a Harman curve, when you're intentionally modifying the EQ to what you subjectively like.
Yeah, some of those were kind of real weird and didn't really look like a house curve to me, but so it was hard for me to like find like kind of a good example of what that would look like. And maybe instead of searching for a house curve, we could just search for a frequency response, subwoofer frequency response, and see one that is higher at the base and kind of slopes to the right, because then we know that they've intentionally EQ'd that, because your room isn't going to do that on its own, right?
Right. Well, you could potentially get it if you've got nice boundary gain, like if you're corner loaded in a concrete corner and your subwoofers are, like in those front corners and it's concrete reinforcement, you can get a nice house curve just kind of automatically. But if you're not corner loaded or your subs are away from the wall and stuff, you will really get a roll off along the base instead of like a house curve.
So Schmock was asking, like, is there a certain frequency, certain hertz that you start your curve down with the mini DSP?
No, I mean, that's subjectivity, right? You play with it and you find out what you like. I think the easiest way to kind of play with that to get started, just elevate your bass a little bit. Once you've got if your subwoofers on their own, they have their own amplifiers, you can elevate your bass, turn up the gain attenuator knobs, or just turn up your subwoofer trims in the AVR, kind of see like if you like having more bass or not. Michael was talking about some negatives. There are some negatives, and he's probably got a little bit more of a list, but the chief one is probably just that dialogue sometimes gets a little harder to hear as you elevate that. The other thing that's kind of interesting, as you raise that bass with your house curve, assuming we're just talking about bass, you're actually changing your crossover point. So since I've still got my screen shared here, can you see my mouse moving right now?
Yes,
Michael?
that's correct. Yes.
Okay. So as this has like 4 to 8 dB boost, as you raise that up, and if this part of the graph is staying flat, you're actually equivalently moving your crossover frequency over to the right. So pretend that this line was here now.
Okay.
And it's trailing down to the line. Your crossover frequency is no longer at 100 hertz or whatever. It's now moved up to 150 or 200 hertz. So you can start hearing, by virtue of having your bass boosted so much, maybe voices in the subwoofer or things that it changes the tonality of the music by boosting the bass a lot. So you kind of have to balance those kinds of potential negatives with your preferences the other way.
Sure. So kind of with this too, and I think we talked about this a little bit. So how many dB would you recommend not boosting or cutting with the mini DSP when setting a curve? Preference, right?
Yeah, it boils down to preference. That's right.
So try a little bit. Try 5 dB, 6
Mhm.
dB, 7 dB. Go up to get a little crazy if you got some quality subwoofers, and Jonathan, of course, he does. So he's got plenty of horsepower there. So he goes a little crazy. He does 12. Do you know what Ryan is at?
Ryan was telling us the other day he likes kind of like 9 to 15 type range. And
That's a yeah,
I feel
pretty
like that
good.
might be a little conservative sometimes because I feel like sometimes a bit over there and he likes his quite a bit hotter than I like mine.
Yeah, he's pulling our chain.
You know,
So
there's some funny stories with this though. Like there's a guy named Luke M. the Man on the forum and Penny
Okay.
Nike One on the forum, and those guys they're really into it, and they're the guys that like newbie where they're 150 dB type level
Right.
bass.
Yeah, sure.
Papa Lock is another guy that was in that
Yeah.
camp for a while,
Yeah.
those guys, some of those guys run their bass 30 dB hot,
Mhm.
especially the lowest bass. And Penny Nike, for instance, he broke out a window doing that with his his basement window just broke the glass right out doing that. So you
Wow.
can take it to the extreme.
Yeah. So I see a couple people chiming in. So we got some folks that Schmock says he's about 7 dB hot.
Hmm.
And then SRW 1000, 6 dB to 8 dB plus. So his are hot. And then you got Dell. He says, man, I don't know about y'all, but I just ain't smart enough to know how to set mine. There's nothing wrong with that, man. It's a learning curve, like what I did there, a learning curve on that. So let's talk about this. So if you wanted to add a house curve,
Hmm.
what are some ways that somebody could do that?
Well, the easiest way would just be to up the gain input attenuator knobs, like on the back of your commercial subwoofer. If you bought a retail sub, they have gain knobs on there. They're
Okay.
input attenuators, but you can just raise that level. So you get it all calibrated. Odyssey does what it wants. Your Yamaha, your Marantz, whatever, your Odyssey auto EQ does what it wants, and then you're just going to say, "Hey, I want to put a little bit more of a house curve on here. I'm going to raise it." You don't know what you're doing exactly if you don't have a calibration mic or a Omni mic REW, that kind of thing to see, but you are giving yourself essentially a house curve. You're raising the bass.
Okay.
If you want to take it to the next level, you get something like a mini DSP. And you
Mhm.
would go in there and you would tailor that curve. Maybe you want to try the exponential tail at the end, or maybe you just want to apply the whole thing equally. Some people do a house curve, which is like boosting the 50 to 70 and the 90 hertz range, where the kick drum that hits you in the chest cavity real hard and
Sure.
gives you that real strong feel in your chest. That's in that 70 to 90 hertz, 110 hertz even range.
Is
So
it really? So I always
yeah.
thought it was I always hear that that was like the 50 hertz because I don't know where the
Mhm,
frequency is,
mhm.
what that feels like, but I've
I
always heard
my
the
my thought on that is 70 to 90 hertz is a kick drum.
okay,
Like, when I've
you're
played with
probably
it,
right.
that's where it's at for me.
Yeah.
And bass feels different. So I think we've talked about that a little bit before. Really low bass is like a wobble. It's like a pant
Mhm.
leg flap. It's not, like, real impactful, but it's like a you feel
It's
it. It's
extra,
a
man. You're like,
pressurization.
"Ooh."
Yeah. And
Yeah,
then there's a chest beat, like a kick drum. A real strong kick drum is like that 70 to 90 hertz type
sure.
range, in my opinion. And that's like moving the jelly in your eyes, your hair is kicking back, your chest is just getting violent.
Yeah.
You know,
Your
the
intestines are rearranging
Yeah,
themselves
yeah, yeah.
inside your
So
organ.
it all feels different, and if you want to emphasize a certain frequency because that's what you like,
Mhm.
that's what the house curve is. You do it.
Sure.
Doesn't
Yeah,
have to be just a flat line or a curve. You can have a little mountain at the part you like.
sure. Now, one thing on my subwoofers, I have the JTR Captivator RS2s. So they do have a gain, so that would
Mhm,
increase, like, the overall, for lack of better words, volume of the subwoofer. But
mhm.
then there's also a man, I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's not gain. Oh man, somebody in the chat help me. Man, I just drew a blank.
Like an EQ2 or something like that, which gives you basically a little bump where you wanna move it.
Basically, yeah, basically what it does. Man, somebody let me know in the chat. What is the other knob on the JTR subwoofers? And it's pretty much on all of them.
Speaker power
The
amp, we could just Google it and probably find it.
yeah, yeah, take a look at that. LF adjust. Thanks so much, Finster. So
There you
Tyler
go.
says LF adjust. So what that does is literally like you can physically, if you leave it at whatever, and you run um, a frequency sweep and take a measurement, and then you bump that up a little bit, you'll literally see, let's see, no, it'd be this end. Let's go this way. And oh man, Michael, you are struggling here. Okay, there we go. That's flat. So you'll literally say you bump up the LFE adjust, and it literally just starts bending that curve up like that. So it's kind of built into that. Hey, Joe says room size control. So different manufacturers, different subwoofers are going to have a different knob, but some of them have that kind of built in. So that's another way that you can kind of add a house curve without maybe the need of a mini DSP.
Right. And if you've got some of those things are in there for the opposite purpose, because if you're a real diehard fan about having a real flat reference line and you don't want your bass boosted, then sometimes as you place your subwoofer, you're getting that boundary gain, especially with like a real strong ported sub, and your line's doing this off that left-hand side, the low frequencies are boosted, and you actually need to cut some away in order to make it flat. And so that line is also for that purpose if you're of that persuasion.
Yeah. So here's a great question, because I saw this come up in some of the Reddit forums when I was doing some research on this earlier. Tyler says, is it correct that you shouldn't have a house curve if you're using dynamic EQ? So when you run Odyssey, there's an option on there for dynamic EQ, and that does some EQing. My understanding is it boosts the low end, but I think they said it also even boosts your surrounds.
Correct.
And as you increase the volume and you get up to 0 dB, it's no longer active. So the higher you go, the less dynamic EQ it's boosting. Is that correct?
That's correct. And one more thing, when you go past 0, like if you play into the positives beyond reference, it goes the opposite direction. It starts pulling bass away and pulling sound away from the surrounds. So that's kind of a negative, in my opinion, on that. The way it applies.
So if somebody
it is a house curve, effectively. Okay. It's a dynamically adjusting house curve. So it's applying more bass when the volumes are low.
Sure.
And removing some as you turn the bass up.
So the question is if I'm using dynamic EQ, does that basically say, hey, look, don't try to make your own house curve on top of that? That'd probably be a bad idea.
It still ends up being preference, in my opinion. Like if you want more than it gives, go for it. You can actually adjust if you're talking Odyssey, because we're talking dynamic EQ, that is an Odyssey trait. There's a reference offset feature within the receivers. You can set it at 0, negative 10, negative 15. I don't remember if there's a negative 5 or not. But as you do that, it's how aggressive that dynamic EQ is getting applied. If you want the most application, then you have it just at 0. And if you want the least application, I think you turn it down to negative 15 on that offset.
Yeah, so Josh says 30 hertz and lower, you kind of feel that, but you don't really hear it. I think we can hear most people close to 20 hertz. That's depending upon your hearing and so forth. And there's even some debate there. But you're right. Those lower frequencies, real low frequencies, especially 10 hertz, 12 hertz, 15 hertz, you don't feel them. But boy, it sure is activating your room and your body and your chairs and all kinds of stuff, man. It'll activate your neighbor's room.
Right. So. Well, I don't agree with that statement on its face, Josh, but I think you're on the right track. I've done testing with frequency response as far as hearing, like sine waves, to a lot of different people that have come through the theater. And what you do with that is you turn your volume way down low, because if your sub's struggling on that, you're going to get harmonic distortions and so forth that are orders on the original bass fundamental frequency. So you can't, if you throw that in the mix, you're obviously going to hear it. Like if you take a little 10-inch sealed and you're trying to do loud volumes, you're going to hear, if you're trying to play a 10 hertz horn, you're going to hear all these other tones that are kind of harmonic distortions on top. So important to have very capable subs for this testing and very low volumes. And in my testing, I've had people hear down as low as like 14 hertz type range. And then I've heard at the high end, like the highest person that I tested in my theater could only hear down to 27 hertz. So you're in the ballpark of like worst case scenario, in my opinion, of actually hearing. But after testing a lot of people, I think most people are in more like that 16 to 24 type range is kind of where our human hearing seems to stop.
Yeah. So here's some good things. So if you have Dirac, so Dirac apparently has an auto target curve. So that may help you in trying to add a target curve. And then Tarhoya says with Arc Genesis, you can do it with what they call deep bass boost. So there's a couple features with different products built into your AVR, which is cool that you can utilize. Try it, test it, like Jonathan said. these are things that they're tools and they're options that you can play with. There's no hardcore. That's like when somebody says, what crossover frequency should I use?
Mm-hmm.
You can't just arbitrarily throw out one. There's no magic number. Same thing with a house curve. There's not a magic house curve that everybody's going to love. Some people absolutely, I mean, some use the Harman curve. Some say the Harman curve wasn't ever even intentionally designed to be for everybody. It was intentionally designed to be for a certain specific speaker. Some people say that it's great. Some people say it's garbage. Again, try something, see if you like the way it sounds. If it doesn't sound great, change it, apply something different, try something different, see what you like. And that's the fun of this hobby, is that yes, we have some guidelines, and yes, we have some things that in general, these are great principles to start with. And I always think that that's the baseline, but then there's some flexibility with this hobby that you can play around with and see what is best preferred to you. Because at the end of the day, I mean, you're the one going in your theater room. Even me as a content creator, yes, I've got 130,000 people looking at my channel, but am I trying to build my theater for them? Or am I trying to build my theater for my family, for my friends, for my guests that come over? That's the ones, as long as they're walking out with a smile on their face, dude, whether it's right, I'm okay with that, because at the end of the day, that's preference. And so I think it's great that a lot of you guys are utilizing house curves. Looks like there was one here. I just missed it. Oh, okay. Jack says, I like the Storm Audio house curves for direct. I didn't know they had one. Is that something you can download that from their website, Josh? Or Jack, I'm sorry. I'm not familiar much with Storm. Ryan is typically the Storm Audio guy. He's not here. He's out snowboarding and skiing, I think. Out in, where did he say he was at? He told me and Claude today, he was sending me some pictures. He was at the airport. Oh, goodness. Where did he say he was? Anyway, where was he at? Oh, Tahoe. So he's going to Tahoe. So, yeah. So that's why he's not here. He's spending some family time, man. We're going in February, going out to visit Claude. And Ryan's coming with his family too. So we'll have some fun out there. Now let's see. Okay. So Chris says some of these bass boost items that are built into receivers and speakers, they can be gimmicky. So yeah. So the old school days, remember back in when you had the car audio and there was a bass boost button, or some AVRs, even 2-channel receivers that have a bass boost button. Typically, that's not advisable to do that, especially when you start cranking it, because it can really jack some stuff up and mess up some speakers and damage some stuff. But that may be a different type of bass boost that these guys are talking about.
Yeah, I don't know which one Chris is talking about. With dynamic EQ that was mentioned earlier, I have a problem with that at lower volumes because it makes your soundstage start feeling like it's coming behind you, because it boosts those surrounds so much at lower volumes. Like if you listen at -30, it's just kind of background music. All of a sudden, your soundstage is completely shifted to the rear of the room, and that doesn't work very well for me.
Sure. And again, it kind of comes back to what you've always suggested, that there's some limitations to auto EQ and these auto parameters, because they're trying to cover as many consumers as possible. They're trying to cover as many different shape rooms and size rooms. And so they can't build something that's perfect, because if they could do that, it would literally be for one size room, one, specific scenario. And you just really can't do that. And so it does the best that it can. And again, try it. I used to love dynamic EQ. I really did, because I like bass, and it added that bass. And I'm like, dude, I like that. I feel it more. And then when I take it away, then I feel like it's kind of lacking. So again, try it. If you like it, use it. If you don't, not a problem, man. He says, as a pipe organ, Gary says, as a pipe organ builder, we have to hear the big pedal pipes and tune them at 16 hertz. Yeah, pipe organs get super low. I love it.
And the volume also correlates to that question that was asked previously, like how low do humans hear? As you crank up that volume, you'll hear lower. And as you lower it, it will go, that frequency you can hear goes higher, of course.
Yeah, High Finance says he uses dynamic EQ on 15 dB offset and an 8 dB house curve on top. So he's doing some complex stuff. So then he adds a house curve on top of that. It makes the -25 volume and -15 volume sound just right. I used to hate dynamic EQ, but after dialing it in, it definitely works. So cool. Glad you found something that worked well for you and for your ears and your situation. And man, if it brings a smile to your face and you're excited about home theater as a result, I think it's awesome. I'm starring some of these as well. And Jonathan, if you see any that that'd be good questions to answer, feel free to star those.
Yeah, I'm trying to cycle back. I saw a question that I thought was interesting a minute ago, and I'm trying to find it again.
Okay.
It didn't start at the time.
Now you have the ability to star, right?
I do.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, feel free to star any of these because I'm usually talking and then Ryan's starring, and then if he's talking, then I'm starring, and so we do that quite a bit. Here's a question. Tyler says, should you be tweaking your overall frequency response after applying the dynamic EQ? So that would almost be, well, dynamic EQ typically is during the calibration process. No. I'm sorry. After you run, it asks you, do you want to use that or not?
It's a toggle on and off.
So it's kind of applying that after the calibration, basically, right?
Right. Yeah, you can do that. Sure. You're welcome to do that outside of the dynamic EQ being on or off. Dynamic EQ doesn't really affect the overall frequency response so much as just the overall SPL levels. And then the bass, it does affect the frequency response, but it's like it's raising the overall levels of the surround sound if at lower volumes, like it's dynamically raising those levels at lower volumes. I don't know, it's easier to see on a graph than it is to describe, but I don't think there's no reason that you can't modify the frequency response to your preference after it's run by all means.
Yeah. So Jack does say you can download those files. So the target curves or house curves. I think that was from Storm from earlier.
Somebody mentions DSP and transducers and all that kind of stuff. The dynamic EQ stuff, in my experience, doesn't work as easily with transducers because it kind of it's easier to know like a known quantity, if you will, that it's not bouncing around, the levels aren't changing. Especially like if you go above reference, the transducers are getting weaker because now your dynamic EQ is applying the other direction. So especially with transducer use, like when you're really trying to dial it in, I thought it was easier just to take that out of the equation and have it be more of a linear, predictable response that you can adjust your transducers to.
Cool. All right, so let me run through a couple of these. I'll just get your opinion. I'm going to share this on my screen. So this was just an article online, and they recommended, like, there's a big problem with, so tell me if you guys can see that. I'll zoom in a little bit. So what are the issues? You see this right here? Okay. So he says there's a couple of issues. So number one, the house curves ignore equal loudness principles set out in the ISO 226-2003. So this might be an older kind of document, including the fact that our ears are less sensitive to both the low and the high frequency end or high end as compared to the mid range. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that statement. We are less sensitive to the lowest and particularly the highest as we age, compared to mid range, which we keep our hearing that longest as we age. But that's going to be hard to apply a real fixed rule across the general populace because it just is. It's going to be different based on the speakers you choose, the room you choose, your own subjective preferences for those listening. Sure. It adds complication. That could be an issue, but I don't know that. Yeah, I don't think that would eliminate using house curve for me. Not in the way I understand it.
So he says also number two, house curves ignore the fact that to be able to set up the correct curve, you need to understand the playback volume, as our perception is volume dependent.
Yeah, I mean, that's what dynamic EQ is trying to do is make it volume dependent, and they're trying to adjust for that, and it's not perfect. But yeah, if you
house curve won't do that.
Right. If you have a static house curve, then it's not going to be volume dependent. It's going to be static. And that's my preference. So I don't consider that an issue. I consider that
John's like, at my volume, that's where I want it, man.
Yeah, I mean, I like my bass 9 to 12 dB hot. If I want to listen to reference volume, I still want my bass 9 to 12 dB hot. I don't want it wimping out on me and going even negative as I go higher. Get out of here.
That's right. That's being counterproductive in your world.
Yeah.
And then lastly, he says house curves ignore the fact that to be able to set up the correct curve, you need to understand the original mastering volume, which is content dependent.
Always a problem in our hobby. But that's if you're trying to make it to that level, you're talking probably independent ears, independent rooms, independent, all that stuff. And that's not real world. That's not what we have.
Totally get it, man. Let me just take a look real quick before I get to the super chats, just to see if there were any other thoughts or questions on the house curve. Just glancing through here, guys. So Jack says, typically the advice is to run the same house curve on all the speakers. Do you normally just run on your subwoofers, or do you apply that house curve to your speakers as well?
No, I don't particularly do a house curve on my speakers. I do an EQ on my speakers, that smiley face EQ we've talked about in the past. You could call that a house curve in some denomination, but no, I don't think you necessarily have to apply it to all your speakers either. Like if you just wanted to apply it to your front, left, center, right, for instance, and have your surrounds not have that same type of thing, this is all preference, right? At the end of the day. Yeah.
And then Sonny says, what do you feel about only applying an EQ below the Schroeder frequency?
I like that.
Schroeder frequency is kind of where your room starts interacting. Is that correct?
That's right. So where position in your room starts becoming more important than just overall. So like at the lowest frequencies, the wavelengths are very long. And if you're in the front left seat versus the front right seat versus the center seat, they're all going to have more of a parallel of what's lower mode or null in that area of the frequency response. Because it's lower, the wavelengths are longer, there's less interaction between each seat. At the higher end of the frequency, when the wavelengths are much shorter, there's tremendous differences between those three seats. So if you apply EQ for one, it's really messing up the other two. At the lowest frequencies, that's not the case. You can apply a more general frequency, a more general EQ that applies to all three seats more correctly, if you will. So that's what the Schroeder frequency is. It's identifying where that modal region is in your room and saying, we're only going to apply EQ where it's beneficial to basically the listening area in general and not the main listening seat alone, the main listening position alone. It's a good practice. I don't know what all EQs can do it. Odyssey can do it. You take the $20 app and you just curtain off everything below your Schroeder frequency. And you can calculate your Schroeder frequency by just doing a web search. It's not, you have to know the dimensions of your room, and then there's a little mathematical thing that he's figured out to apply and get your frequency. In my room, it's like 110 hertz is my Schroeder frequency. So it's very low.
Right. Yeah. A lot of guys suggest even most of them are higher than that. It's interesting. Is that because your room is so big?
It is. It's because of the airspace. Because my room's not terribly tall, but it is large and there's a lot of airspace. And so the more airspace you have, the lower your Schroeder frequency. They say in like a general room, you can try 500. If you don't know how to calculate or you don't want to do it, you can try just curtaining everything above 500. And that's kind of a good place to start. Okay. But I think in a lot of rooms, it's probably going to end up being lower than that.
So Nicholas, and his is 2 kilohertz. That seems high.
That's pretty high. That's really high, Nicholas. But it doesn't need to be the Schroeder. That's too high for a Schroeder, but it might be your preference, and that's okay too.
Okay. Nicholas, just curious, like, how did you figure that out? Like that 2 kilohertz was a good cutoff in your room. So again, I don't do a lot of that on my setup. He says I have no EQ above 2000.
Have you tried, Nicholas? You should pine back in and say, have you tried anything less than that? Like I played with those in multiple iterations. I think we talked about this in a previous podcast. I tried the 110 that was rated, 150, 190, 200, 210, 225, 250, 300, 500. I tried those different things, listening to them for a little bit after each one of those things. My preference was not as low as 110, but maybe even like 180, 200 type range. That was kind of where I preferred it.
Okay. Sonny says, Mike, he mentions REW has a calculator to figure it out for your room.
Nice. I didn't know that. I have not.
Mike, where's that found? If you don't mind, drop it in the chat for us. I love the fact that you guys are like, we're not the only ones knowledgeable. Like I'm never the smartest guy in the room usually, unless I just got some really dumb friends hanging out with. But normally that's not the case. I like surrounding myself with guys like Jonathan to where I'm continually learning and I'm stretching my brain, wrapping around this. And Tyler, appreciate that. He says this topic discussion is super beneficial. But yeah, so that's super cool. But let us know, Mike, where that's found in REW. So if you guys are trying to figure out trying to figure out the Schroeder frequency in your room, you can maybe pull that up.
So Nick replied and kind of explained why he does it. His center has a hump, probably a mode at 500 hertz.
Okay.
And that EQing up a little higher than that. I don't know if you need to go to 2 kilohertz from 500 hertz, but if you found it works, then you found it works.
Sure.
Helps flatten it out.
I appreciate that, Nicholas. All right. Any other thoughts on the house curve? So again, play with it, try different ones. Some AVRs and processors have some built-in tools to provide kind of like a house curve. Some subwoofers have that, the LFE boost on like the JTR subwoofers. There's other subwoofers that have kind of that attenuation, not attenuation, but it's going to boost up those lower frequencies. So yeah, man, play with it, have fun with it. But any other thoughts before we get to the super chats, and then we'll jump into answering your questions as well?
No, but if we have some questions, we can circle back round to it with the house curve too as part of this next thing.
Yeah, perfect. All right, guys. Bruce, appreciate the $2 super chat. Always appreciate the love and support there, brother. Let me slide down here. Hi, Finest. Appreciate the $10 super chat. He says, I have dual SVS SB16s in my large open concept room. I applied a house curve down to 16 hertz, and I could tell that I overworked the subs. Also lost that 50 hertz kick with music in the process. Any advice there, Jonathan?
Yeah, so he's got sealed box 16s, right?
Sure.
I mean, you can overwork them if you apply too much. Yeah, if you're applying too much gain, you're expecting too much, you hit the excursion too high, you make them make bad noises.
Yeah.
Yeah. You shouldn't be losing the 50 hertz kick by applying low LFE. If in fact, let's be scientific about this. If you played a 50 hertz kick drum or 50 hertz sine wave for that and measured it, and then you applied your low house curve, like say you raised 20 hertz by 5, 6, 10 dB. If you played that same kick drum at 50 hertz, you shouldn't be losing it. What maybe instead, like if you isolated that, you shouldn't be losing it. What maybe instead is that you're now boosting sections of the movie. Maybe there's a synth sound or something else that's a low frequency that you're hearing more than the kick drum, but you haven't really lost the kick drum. You've maybe just boosted something to overtake it in volume at the lower end of the spectrum.
Yeah. I reviewed the dual SB16, so that was the first subwoofers that I had ever heard, even in somebody else's home. So I heard them first in my home. And to me, my room's 13 by 19 with 10-foot ceilings. So it's not I call that a medium-sized room. Definitely not a big room. And it wasn't that they just struggled. I just wanted more. I really did. And so that's when I was like, hey, Nick, would you be interested in sending me the PB16? Because like I've heard some crazy stuff about them. And I really am just wanting to see what your flagship subwoofers can provide. And so he sent me, I had the dual SB, and then he also sent me the dual PB, and I ended up buying the PB16. I sold my 4 Klipsch RSW15s. I'm like, this is where it's at. This is the first time I had ever had anything in the adjacent room fall off the wall. It was like on a shelf, and it wasn't anything big. It was like one of my son's figurines or something, but it hit the floor. I'm like, yes, I've arrived. When I'm moving stuff in my house, I was all excited. So yeah, but yeah, sealed subs on what I would consider a smaller, even though 15 isn't really small. When you're at 15 and lower, yeah, I mean, I think any subwoofer, just about any subwoofer, I mean, they all have limitations.
You need just more. Yeah,
I know Jeff is like, let's see if we can break it, but I'm sure we could break some JTR subs eventually. You crank them just stupid levels or apply too much. But then again, maybe he has some kind of limiters in there to prevent it from, damaging the subwoofer. But most subwoofers, you'll find out their limitation. Even with the PB16s, one of their limitations was I would experience port chuffing with high volume, really low frequencies. So like when you did the Edge of Tomorrow, if you try to do that at reference, it really didn't sound great. And so that's just a limitation. So as long as you know what those limitations are, and you just try to stay within those parameters, your sub is going to sound great.
So he's got a follow-up here.
Okay.
I'm going to post that on the screen.
Perfect.
Does this mean I like a mid-bass hump curve instead of hockey stick house curve? There is plenty of truth to that wondering, because we've seen this on the forum and discussion many times where people go from kind of a pro audio sub that really has a efficiency around that 70 to 90 hertz range, maybe even 40 hertz. And not only an efficiency there, but it doesn't even produce the lower frequencies, right? It rolls off. It has a high pass filter at like 40 hertz and nothing below is even being produced. And they go from that style of sub, which is like we talked about earlier, it's that chest pound, like real intense feeling of a kick drum, to something like an SVS or something that's maybe it's a do-it-yourself thing and it's tuned to 10 hertz or 15 hertz. And they're like, I don't like this. Where'd my bass go? This isn't what I'm used to. I want to have that bar and grill feeling where they got the subs cranked and your hair's moving, your glass is shaking, all that kind of stuff. Like I miss that, because now their sub is targeting those lower frequencies and it doesn't have that mid bass hump. And what's more, and we've talked about this previously too, a subwoofer you can EQ it to whatever you want it to be within its limits. But as soon as you exceed those limits, when you start taking it out of its ability to have that EQ, it reverts back to its native EQ. So if there's an inductance hump at like 60 or 70 hertz, like a lot of those pro audio subs have, when you stress that subwoofer out, you might have tried to make it flat to 20, 30 hertz. You stress that sub out, it starts bending back to its natural impedance, and that EQ down here that you applied it's just not there. And so a pro audio sub, when it's at its limits, still has that intense kick, where something like an SVS sub, when it's at its limits, they've designed that to have that inductance lower. It stays pretty flat at its limits. So you don't get the sound. What I'm trying to say is the sound character changes on some subwoofer drivers when you're at its limit and it's in that kick drum range. And the real high excursion drivers don't necessarily do that. They might keep more of a flat response through when you're pushing them. So the sound characteristic is different at its extreme limits. And that's observable. That's noticeable. Like it's not just a little bit. It's a pretty keen difference. And that's something that most people aren't aware of. Like you think, oh, I EQ'd it flat. You EQ'd it flat at a low volume. You crank it up, it's going to revert back to what it wants to naturally do without EQ.
Interesting. Good to know. Joe, appreciate the $5 super chat. Can you recommend a decent, extremely cheap amplifier to test something before I decide to move forward that should sound similar to my Denon A1H? No, I'm sorry, Denon one channel. What is that? I assumed he meant Denon A1H.
Well, we need a little bit more information, Joe, on what you're wanting to test, how much wattage do you need, etc.
Yeah, I'm curious. We'll leave this kind of on the back end, so I won't uncheck it yet, Joe. But give us some more and you don't have to do another super chat. Just put it in there. We'll definitely highlight it. But yeah, need a little bit more information on there to kind of figure out what your question is. John, appreciate the $10 super chat. When using a pro style amp with only XLR inputs, is there a workaround for using RCA to XLR adapters and limiting inputs to 2 volts in place of 4 volts? Will I only see my sub amp power output? Oh, half my sub amp power output. And he's got the FP 14,000.
So you're saying because you're using RCA outs that your AVR or your processor only has 2 volt out instead of 4 volt, which you have probably read as more typical. So the answer doesn't really have anything to do with the 2 or 4 volt. It has to do with the FP 14,000's input sensitivity. Let's look it up, Michael. FP 1400 input sensitivity.
So is it this one here, the lab grouping?
Yeah, that's a beast of an amp. Now he might be talking about the clone, but yeah, that's a beast of an amp. So sensitivity, that's what we're looking for.
I'll see if it's on here.
A lot of times you'll see like a 1.25.
Here we go, right here, Jonathan.
All right, very good.
Gain, sensitivity, limiters, but there's a lot here. Default gain is 38 dB. Would that be it?
No, you're close. We need to find the input sensitivity. It would usually be like a 1.25, a 0.7, a 4 volt. It should be a voltage.
Voltage, let's see. Volt. That's the only voltage on the page. Oh no, there's a couple more. Let's see. So there's those.
That's
that one. And then Nothing really there in the main body. Yeah, not really seeing it on here.
I'm gonna just web search it in general and see if we can find it.
But yeah, that's what is it? Holy cow.
One of those things that's got a bunch of, yes, it is.
Look at this, man. 2350 at 8 ohms, 4400 watts at 4 ohms, and 7000 watts if you're dipping down to 2 ohms.
Yeah, definitely 240-volt power you need for that.
That is a monster of an amp, dude. But yeah, PA style amplifier there.
Okay, so here, I'm gonna share my screen, Michael, because I found a site for it. Present, share screen. Okay. Did it pop up?
Yeah, I'm gonna hide his question just to make it easier to see that graph. Go ahead.
So this isn't this is real unfortunate if it's not on the lab grouping site and it's on the Chinese clone site.
Yeah.
Well, we probably just didn't find it on the lab grouping site, but here it is in this, and this should be similar because they're a clone, right? You can change your input sensitivity here. So since you know, I'm assuming you know that your output is 2 volt on your processor you're using now, you could use this gain dB setting of 38, which would give you 1.74. That way your input voltage, is a pretty good match to the input voltage on the amplifier. If you went something like this, you would only be able to get like a quarter power because this is maybe a fifth, 20% power because it's expecting 10 volts to light up the amp to full power, and you're only feeding it 2. So if you want to be able to feed it full power, you probably need to choose this 38 dB dip clip. And so that would be this. You'll want to make sure your lab, if you have the name brand lab group, and make sure it's the same pin configuration. I would assume it would, but this would be like a clip here, and here on that input sensitivity. Does that make sense?
Did that answer the rest of it? Is when you use a Pro amp with only XLR inputs, there is a workaround for RCA. Okay. Yeah. I think so. Cool deal, man. Great question, John. That's a killer amp, bro. Holy cow. That's a lot of power. Let's see. I'm looking. Okay. Joe just gave some more detail. Appreciate that, brother. I just saw it come in. Let's go back to Joe. So his original super chat was, oh man, it's way up here. Here we go. So original question, can you recommend a decent, extremely cheap amplifier to test something before I decide to move forward, but should sound similar to my Denon, one channel? And then the more details is I have a weird single surround back setup. Okay, so he doesn't have dual surrounds in the back. He's got a single one that doesn't play perfect with Atmos, although supported, but does with DTS:X. I want to experiment with a stereo to mono converter on the processors, 2 surround backs instead of using the 1 surround back option in the processor. Oh, wow. If it works well, I might spend more on that option. So he's basically wanting to run, he's got a single speaker in the back, right? For surrounds.
Mm-hmm.
He's saying it works well with DTS:X, but doesn't work well for when he's got it on Atmos content.
I always have this as a fallback. There's a Crown XLS series on eBay. They're 10, 20 years old, 15 years old. They are just selling for nothing. And they're super good amps. They'll last 20, 30 years. Yeah. So if you look up XLS 402, XLS 202, XLS 802, 1602, those are the numerical numbers for them. And they sell for like $100, and they're really powerful amps, right? And they're really good amps. So it's the 202 would be 200 watts by 2 at 8 ohms. 402 would be 400 watts by 2 at 8 ohms. And literally like $100 shipped is what you should be looking to pay for something like that. I don't know how you really beat that, because if you pay $100 for an amp at like Amazon, you're not getting name brand and you don't know what you're getting, you know.
Yeah. It's kind of like those little desktop amplifiers that they sell, the little dinky ones.
Yeah, little T amps or something.
Yeah. Little desk for power and desk speakers.
Right.
Cool, man. All right. I think there was another. Let me undo that one. Michael Griffin says, appreciate the $5 super chat. My living room has a half wall in the rear, so I can't really do 2 surrounds. And that's, in all of our rooms, sometimes we have compromises we have to make. We have limitations. And so that's one of his limitations. My Denon 3808 supports a rear center speaker. Thoughts on doing a 6.1.4 configuration?
I don't think I've ever experimented with a single rear speaker. Have you, Michael?
I have not. So he's basically said the 6 at the beginning. So instead of having a 7.1 system,
Sure.
he would only have one
One
rear. So that's a 6.1.
Yeah. I can't
So when
advise
he
him
says
very good
rear,
because I haven't experimented.
yeah. So when he says rear center, I'm assuming you're saying that it can say, you can tell it, hey, I don't have two. I know some of the older AVRs, as
Mhm.
we were coming up from 5.1 to 7.1, I think in that transition, there were some AVRs back then that said, hey, if you only have a single center or single
Mhm.
surround, we can do that. We'll
Mhm.
matrix what should have went to the left surround and the right surround, and we'll just put that in one speaker for you. And so
There
it did
was
the matrix thing for you.
there was even a codec for 6.1 for a while. DTS had a codec, and it was on the Lord of the Rings discs. I have a copy of it still. So it was,
Okay.
like, legitimately it was made for 6.1.
Yeah.
Uh, I I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to tell you that except for just experiment and see what you think.
Yeah.
It sounds like it might go in line with the previous question where Joe was saying that he had something
Mhm.
kinda weird happening with Atmos when he was trying to use a single center channel in the
Yeah.
rear, or single speaker in the rear, I should say.
Yeah.
Oh, there
Michael,
you
I'm
go.
not
Joe says in the comments, "I can answer this question in depth."
yeah,
Right
he's
there.
dropping it.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so
Alright.
Michael, you said crickets. I'm not sure what you meant by that. He must have been
Just 'cause we can't answer them. We can't answer them with experience. That's what it amounts to.
um okay. So any more thoughts on that one before we move on? Did we hit that okay? I mean, I've never experienced a 6 channel versus a 7 channel. Like um about the only equivalent of that is back in Dolby Pro Logic, the rear channels were mono. So basically it was the same content going to left surround as your right surround. They just happened to be separated into 2 speakers, but they were duplicating that same. That's about as close as I've come to it.
Hey, Joe, on your comment earlier too with the amplifier, if you're wanting to spend a little bit more, and it didn't sound like that was your goal, you just wanted something cheap, but the Behringer A800 is a audiophile amp from Behringer. They used to be about $250 new, and we compared that directly with a benchmark AHB2, something like that, which is, like, at the time, the best amplifier that
Mhm.
that ASR had ever measured. And in a double blind test from the Kansas City group, none of us there could tell the difference between that Behringer A800 and the benchmark amp that literally was named benchmark and had like 116 synad. So I say that to say this: if you want to spend a little bit more and get a decent little passive amplifier, look up Behringer A800 as another option.
Yeah, I remember this right here. So it was called Dolby EX. So it was like one of those in between when we had Dolby Digital and Dolby True HD, somewhere in there. They had a
Mm.
format called Dolby EX that had that center rear surround. Uh, oh, he's a not a knock at all. It's a odd setup. So here's what Joe said, and you didn't read this, right, Jonathan?
Not yet.
I was reading through some comments. He says the problem is Atmos incorrectly, in my opinion, maps the surround back content position to the rearmost pair in the setup rather than matrixing to the center surround back and the side surround working together like DTS. So the only time the center surround will be used in Atmos is when the content has objects between. Interesting, those normal surround backs, not so what he's saying is in his experimentation, when you tell the AVR you want to center, it doesn't play content from there unless it's like an object moving, which that seems kind of odd that they would do that. Like, how often would that ever happen? That you've got content just kind of in between those 2 channels. So I would think the goal would be like, hey, let's put some stuff back there, you know? So
Yeah.
let's matrix it. So maybe they're not doing that. But again, I just haven't experienced that in my setup. Ivan, appreciate it, brother. I know he's got to head out. He's enjoyed the topic tonight. Got to go record some episode for bed. So appreciate you, brother. Have a good night, man. We'll see you at M-Wave. All right. I think I got all the super chat. Nope. I got one more. Hulk thing. Appreciate the $10 super chat. Good day, fellas. What's up with them SVS towers? Will there be a new sub? And would you recommend an Epson 800 ceiling mounted short throw projector over a JVC NZ7 if you were near budget limit? So lots of thoughts here, lots of kind of a couple comments. So let's look up the new, they should be on their website by now. Let me see. You'd think they'd be like right on the homepage. So SVS just announced at CES. Oh, I guess they wouldn't be on their website because they haven't really, they're not, you can't purchase them yet. It'll be a little bit. But SVS just, here, let me do this. I know how I can do it. Because I shared some photos on my Facebook page. If you guys aren't following on Facebook, my personal Facebook, you can just do facebook.com/youthman. But let me pull up some photos for you. There we go. All right, let me share my screen so you guys can see this. So SVS did come out with some pretty cool looking speakers. They're definitely different. They kind of remind me of Focal speakers. Now, if I click next, let me know, Jonathan, does that change on your end?
It does. I can see it.
I didn't know if it was going to, because sometimes when it captures the screen, it doesn't capture these like slideshow things. So you can see it's kind of got a curved speaker design cabinet here. Got those chamfered, is it chamfered angled edges.
I know what you're trying to say though.
Yeah, tweeters in the center. You got two mid-range flanking that up and down. There's two 8-inch drivers on top and bottom, and then on the back side, you've got another two 8-inch, and these are ported back here. Let's see if we got, there's the speaker grill. It's magnetic now instead of using the binding posts. And then there's the piano black finish. And then the center channel really is about the size, I think. I don't think they've changed the size for the most part of the current SVS Ultra. I did check with, or at least saw Larry mention that they're all upgraded parts. So it's not just taking the stuff from Ultra and putting them in there. So they're new components in them, but it's still kind of the same layout and styling of their Ultra. There's the bookshelf, and then there's like a little pamphlet, and then there's kind of all the new names, the Ultra Evolution Pinnacle, which to me is a little confusing because they're kind of combining the Ultra series and the naming scheme of the Prime Pinnacles, and now they're putting it into the Ultra Evolution Pinnacle. But then they've got the Ultra Evolution Titan, the Ultra Evolution Towers, and so those are just smaller versions of the towers. Then you've got two bookshelves down at the bottom, the Ultra Evolution bookshelf, and then you got a smaller one, the Ultra Evolution Nano. And they're updating their Ultra Elevation, which was like their Prime Elevation. And then we've got the new Ultra Evolution Center Channel. So question regarding that is, what's up with them, man? Will there be a new sub? So they have not, SVS, along with most companies, are pretty tight-lipped, and they keep everything close to the chest. The last thing they want to do is put out things prematurely. And so most companies, like even as content creators, we typically don't get too much of an advance notice. The only time we get really early notice is, let's say, for instance, a company reaches out and says, hey, Michael, we've got some new subwoofers. They haven't done this, by the way, hypothetical. Hey, Michael, we've got some new subwoofers coming out. We'd love to get those in your hands, see what you think about them. And we'll be announcing these on such and such date. And if you could just do us a favor, and we sign an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, that says, hey, I can't really talk about this. I can't share this information. I can't show these photos. I can't make this known. But on the day of the embargo releases, then I can share a video or I can share some photos of it. So I don't know. I honestly don't know if SVS supposedly, I say supposedly, they're always, I mean, think about it, they're always working on something. Now, whether that is kind of reworking one of their existing subwoofers, like the PB16 Ultra. I mean, my goodness, it's been on the market, what, 6 years now, maybe longer, 7 years, and maybe even longer than that now. Oh my goodness, time is flying. But so maybe they're redesigning that. But I mean, again, it would literally be just me and Jonathan going what we think, and that really doesn't matter because it may or may not come true. You could have the same thought or a totally different thought. So are they working on new subs? They just haven't said anything. Would you recommend the Epson 800 ceiling mounted short throw projector over an NZ7 if you were near budget limit? Okay, so if he's approaching his limit, I'm guessing he can cover, the 800 is within his budget. So what is the 800 as far as pricing? Epson 800 projector. Let's see. So that is the LS 800. Now that's an ultra short throw. So he says short throw. So it's technically an ultra short throw. So that would be like right up here. Let me share my screen again so you guys can see it. Jonathan, I have not looked at chat in a little bit, so if you'll keep an eye on that for me. So this is the ultra short throw projector. So MSRP, so that's going to be a huge difference. Yeah, so if this is your budget to get to the NZ7, you're talking
10 grand, maybe 9 if you find a $1,000 rebate somewhere or something.
Yeah,
Big difference.
That's a huge difference. So if you're already at your budget, is there another projector? Because that's an ultra short throw. To me, there's some limit. I like ultra short throws, but I think that it's kind of for specific use case scenarios. If you can go with a dedicated, regular, I guess not necessarily long throw, but just a normal projector, I typically recommend those. But yeah, the NZ7, unless you can just find a youth band deal on that, it's probably going to be, unless you're saying, hey, you've got close to the NZ7, give us some clarification, Hulk, if you're still here. Because if you're close to the projector, the NZ7 price point, I would say absolutely hold out and save up a little bit longer, sell a couple things in the garage that you aren't using or whatever.
Kidney.
Yeah, use that to fund that. I mean, would that be a fair assumption, Jonathan? Would you say?
The black levels are going to be tremendously different between the two. But you can have an auto light rejection screen with the 800 even from Epson's standpoint. If you needed to have some ambient light, you might be better off with the LS 800. I don't know. I'm with Michael. The distinction between the short throw 800 and the NZ7 is kind of an odd distinction. Like they're two different animals. They're used for two different use cases, two different rooms. If you want something that would be more comparable, like an NZ7 versus a LS 12,000 versus the LS 800, the LS 12,000 is the Epson's long throw, their blackest, best contrast laser model. That would be the more typical comparison between a JVC and an Epson.
Yeah. Like I said, they're kind of two different use cases. And so what he's asking is, so here's one challenge. Here's one thing I would share with you just from my experience. I've reviewed quite a few of the ultra short throw projectors. They're pretty tedious to get aligned. I'm not going to lie. It seems like it would just be real easy, but man, you can pull it out a little bit and it throws stuff off. And I mean, and typically on just about every single one of them, you're having to kind of skew that image to get it to fit in the screen. And I think the biggest reason is because it's so close to the screen. You're talking sometimes 7 inches from the wall to get 100 inch, 120 inch, 140 inch projection. And I mean, just very, very tiny movements, whether it's angle, whether it's, height, that's another thing. It's just super tedious. So I can't imagine mounting that joker upside down. Now, granted, you can move the projector up and down probably pretty easy, but once you've mounted it to the ceiling, you're not going to be able to put it any closer, and you're certainly not going to be able to pull it any further from the screen. I just think that's going to be an install nightmare for me. I would not want to attempt that. So, but yeah, my vote, if you're close to the budget of the NZ7, 100%, save up a little bit longer, be patient. I think it'll really be worth it. Or like Jonathan mentioned, look at their LS 12,000. So that would be more in line with your budget probably. So again, that seemed like that's a big gap though.
It is. It's double the price difference.
Yeah. So I'm not sure where your budget is closer. If you're saying you're kind of maxed out at the 800, I mean, it's hard to recommend somebody, just be patient and wait and double your budget. That's kind of unrealistic for most people. But if you're close to the NZ7, man, go for it. It's a beautiful projector. Matter of fact, Sheldon, one of the home theater experiences at M-Wave this year, last year I had a chance to visit his theater for some demos, and I asked him, I said, Sheldon, I said, man, this image is gorgeous. I'm like, do you have the NZ8? And he said, no, it's the NZ7. I'm like, dang, that thing looks great, man. I mean, it's beautiful, beautiful image. So love that projector for sure. Oh, here's the other thing. So ultra short throw projectors, if you're going to be using multiple content, 2.35 to 1, 16 by 9, that sort of thing. Number one, you really can't go with a scope screen with an ultra short throw projector. It's designed as a 16 by 9 image, and you don't have any zoom, you don't have any lens memory. With the Epson LS12000, with the JVC NZ7, you're going to have the ability to set some presets so that when you're watching scope content on a scope screen, it zooms all the way in, you focus it, you reposition it, and you save that as a preset. Then when you're in a DVD or Blu-ray menu or 4K menu, and that's in 16 by 9, you hit another button and it zooms out into your 16 by 9 preset. And you can set up to like 10 presets in the JVC. I'm not sure how many. You're correct. Yes, Joe, MadVR would fix that scope problem. But when you're already trying to go from 3,500, if that's his budget, it's not feasible to say, hey, just tack on another 16,000. That'll take care of it. That really won't work too well. But great question, man.
Let's swing back to the SVS thing for a minute.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Can I put on my skeptical hat for a moment?
Nope. You're not allowed. We don't have any controversy. We're brand friend. Nah. Yeah, of course, man.
All right. I'm going to share my screen for just a second.
Do it. Yeah.
Let's do the whole screen so you can see this. This is okay. So in Paint, crude drawing, emphasized the curve to kind of show what they're talking about. Yeah. The movie that you had on your Facebook page that SVS did, their marketing video, reeks of marketing to me, and I'll explain why. They're talking about time-aligned drivers, and to do so, they had the drivers on different planes, and I've emphasized this with more probably of a curve than they actually have, just to kind of show what I'm talking about. Sure. For that time alignment to take place, your head has to be exactly the right height as that tweeter. If your head is up here, that time alignment's broken. So
because it's changing the distance.
Yes. Think about, for this to work, your head has to be exactly the same distance from all three drivers. And that only works in one position. The elevation makes it so the line, so the speaker has to be closer to the head here, because the speaker has to be closer to make the line the same distance. These lines are the same, so this is really crude. But you understand what I'm saying. If your head was up here, get the right shape. If your head was up here, this is really broken at that point.
Right.
And not only that, but they have what looks to be some sort of woofers on the back. I don't know if they're subwoofers or what. I don't know.
Those are, my understanding, they're active 8-inch woofers.
Okay, so if you're doing this fancy time alignment with here, what the heck are you doing with these? Like what is that? Only works if you're doing really low frequencies back here. If you're trying to play these up to like 120 hertz, you're kind of screwing stuff up. I think. Like I have questions. Let's just put it that way. I have questions.
And that'd be great. Honestly, that'd be a great idea to even get them on the podcast and say, hey, Nick, tell us more about this. And he may have to get one of his engineers, or he may know how they designed that and why they chose to do that. But
yeah, and then the other thing, if we're talking, my red flags go up when people start talking marketing nonsense. So in that video, it's talking about how we have these new technology, these diamond encrusted tweeters that play up as high as 50,000 hertz without breakup, and then it says, and most people probably don't hear that high, but it's nice to be able to say it does, and that just it kind of is, it's bad. Like if I was in head of the top marketing department, I'd say we're not doing this, because the reality is humans don't hear that high. If you do testing and you're a middle-aged man like I am, I'm 44. I can probably only hear up to 14 or 15,000 hertz right now. So what it does beyond 20,000 hertz, if I was really young, like I've done hearing tests with my family. My daughters, who are like 6 and 8, can get close to 20,000 hertz with hearing tests, and I'm way down at 14 or 15. And my 15-year-old daughter is down at like 16 to 17. So there's going to be some variance there, but no human is hearing up to 50,000 hertz. And for them to imply that most humans don't hear that high, it's still nice to have it. I don't like that. I want truth in advertising. I don't like that nonsense. And the time alignment stuff is just like another little piece of the puzzle, right? Like you got drivers on multiple sides. You didn't talk about this needs to be ear height. What if you have risers? Now that's messed up. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wasn't overly excited by the video, to be quite honest. I think it might be just a really nice high-end speaker where some of it's marketing BS and it probably still sounds great. And it probably is still something that will like give you a nice pride of ownership. It's going to sound good. It's going to look good. It's going to be a premium product that they can sell off. And a lot of the stuff that they're going to be promoting it with is nonsense. These are
definitely going to be more on the higher end. They're going to be, my understanding, I think it's like 6,000, 5,000, and 4,000 a pair for the top one, the middle one, and then the smaller towers. So that's kind of estimated. That hadn't been totally confirmed, but that was kind of what.
And then they're talking about how this is the and correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I took it to basically say in that same video, we have designed a speaker that is allowing it to be heard, the content to be heard as as it was mastered. I'm thinking no mastering in any content ever has used these speakers to master their audio. What are you talking about? Like their marketing team needs to be tempered.
Jonathan said, come on, guys, be real with us, man.
Yeah.
We're audiophiles. Tyler says they're using opposing, which helps the cabinet resonance. And then Tar Hoya says the rear woofers are aligned and run in parallel to the front woofers for force cancellation, according to their marketing.
The rear woofers are aligned and run in parallel to the front woofers to force cancellation. All right, I need to read up on that, Tar Hoya, because in one way that's going to cancel out bass entirely. If they're doing it in parallel, interesting.
So think about this. I guess I reviewed the well, you've seen dual opposing subwoofers.
Yes.
So the concept there is, my understanding, they're providing the same bass frequencies coming out of them, but by maybe going in, I don't think they're phase aligned different, like opposite phase. But anyway,
it's like dual opposed is what you're saying, effectively.
Yeah. So they're phasing.
It can't be dual opposed unless the picture that I saw was wrong, right? Because they're not at the same plane and they're not even the same angle.
Okay, so maybe they're not.
One is straight up and down, and the other is, offset like that.
Oh, I see. I was thinking just the fact that one's on the front, one's on the back, but you're saying they pretty much have to be like
for dual opposed, it has to be within like a fraction of a precise measurement. I mean, it's so important to have that exactly like that to get rid of any vibration or acoustic resonance of the cabinet type thing.
Yeah, and that's what that's for, and that's fantastic because I've seen that. I put a water glass on top of a dual 18, and like the glass barely moved. I'm like, holy cow, how's that possible? But that's the reason. He says the dual opposed on the back is also curved.
Well, pull up a picture of it if you don't mind. Let's look at it.
Certainly will, yeah. And again, all we have right now is what Nick sent me, what they showed at CES. Let me go back to
your glass of water illustration. Brings back a memory of mine. Seton Sound does a Seton Submersive, and it's a dual opposed 15-inch driver. And one of his party tricks that he did at his meets that he was kind of emceeing was he would stand a dime up on end, which is a talent in itself to get the dime to stand, and play the subwoofer at reference volume, and the dime wouldn't fall over because that dual opposed in perfect alignment cancels out all the vibration on the cabinet.
So it does look like he's correct. You can see how this one is angled forward
and down.
Go to the back, this one is angled forward and the bottom is further out. So it does look like it's at the same angle like this now.
What about the bottom one though, Michael?
That looks straight down on the back, but on the front, it's straight down too. Well, no, I think it is coming forward. Let's see if we got a side profile anywhere. It's hard to tell if that's going straight down. To me, it looks like it's coming out further on the bottom. Yeah, so the bottom is not curved, but it's angled. But the back does not look like it's angled. It looks like it's straight down. So you're saying if the back was angled to match the front, then maybe that would be true dual
Potentially
opposed.
dual opposed, potentially, if it's the exact same angle and so forth. If it's not the
So
same angle, it can't be using that technology. It can be using something else.
Tarhoya says the bottom is angled in. You can see the rectangle in the middle on the back. That is the plush point. Okay, so they did say 3,004 and 5. Yeah, that's what I had heard too.
I don't know. And I'm not saying it will sound bad. I've heard SVS Ultra Towers.
I see what he's saying. So this is the flat part, Jonathan. So in the back, this is angled from top down to here. So that's angled forward. This part is parallel with the front. So that's flat, which would be this part right here where the tweeter is. That's the flat part. And then, does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then this is angled forward. So it's just like angle of the camera.
I still feel like it's messing up your impulse response, your time delays. If that's your thing, if that's your marketing, then why are we putting speakers on the back? I don't understand that. And Torhoya, if you want to really put the science of this to a test, just like I talked about that seat and submersive, when you go to your audio show and you hear that thing, tell them to crank it up, see if you can balance a dime on there, put a cup of water on it and see if you see ripples like Michael mentioned. Either one of those will tell you whether it's actually acoustically balanced in that way. Yeah, and our pictures we're looking at are not perfect to judge us. It's just some concerns we have off the top of our cuff here.
Last one real quick. So in this photo here, you can see it a little bit better. So that is angled right here. So it's kind of angled in. So it does look like they're on identical planes on the bottom and on the top. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
They're all black on the brochure. Yep. Doesn't Definitive Technology use kind of similar technology? Some people have asked that. I don't think what they're trying to do, because they're only doing it with the woofers. Definitive is using like mid-range to kind of bounce stuff and kind of provide this broader. I don't think that's what they're trying to do with the bass frequencies. I think they're just trying to provide you a more slam. You got 4/8 instead of 2. So, but cool, man. Good stuff. So I like new stuff. And like you said, we won't know till we get it in hand and listen to it. And some people like Audioholics or Amir measures it if he gets a pair. So who knows? Oh man. So, all right, I'm going to go back to, I'm not going to star anymore. So we'll go through these because we still got a ton of these. So Bruce, can you give me some advice about Sony ES 5000 ES AV receiver? Is it compatible to a 2-channel setup? Any suggestion for a less expensive AVR? So a lot of people want to know, can I use my AVR for music? And some people claim that certain AVRs are better at doing 2-channel than others, because we used to always hear Denon is great for movies, but if you're really into 2-channel, go with the Marantz because they have I forget what they call it, the music chip or musical chip. And that could be that marketing mumbo too, because they're talking about different DACs and there's some controversy there. But, will it work great as a 2-channel? I think if you're using that, I totally misread that. Is it compatible for a 2-center channel setup? Scratch everything I just said. So he's talking about that dual center channel, maybe top and bottom above his TV, below his TV. I don't know if that AVR supports that.
I feel like that was one of the things Sony brought to the table, but I haven't followed this receiver, and we probably should, because it seemed like we get a question on this like every week.
I don't even have a contact with Sony, so I wouldn't even know who their marketing person is, because I haven't received HDAM. Yeah, so honestly, Bruce, I'm not familiar with the Sony, their new lineup as much. I'm sure that it's probably on their website. If you take a look and see if they offer that. And in the chat, if you guys know that, if maybe you have the 5000, let us know in the chat if you know. Zach says, any good place to get CBT DIY speaker kits?
Only one place that I know about, and I don't know if they still have it. Let me web search that. You go on to the next question. We'll come back to this one while I look it up.
All right, we just had that one. Michael says, have you guys thought about inviting a company called Glowbox to M-Wave? We certainly have. I know Jesse. Jesse and I have had many conversations. Matter of fact, I just texted Jesse literally because he said, hey, man, hope you're doing good. Check with me after the first of the year was the last conversation that I had with him. Here it is, Jesse Lee. I called him Jesse Lee Glowbox. And he said, it's freezing here in Kansas City, because that's the cool thing. He's literally in Kansas City. No reason why he shouldn't be there. So I texted him. I said, hey, fantastic. I said, now that CES is behind us, I'm reaching out to brands. Just had one deposit received yesterday and another 2 today. We got some new vendors that have come on board. And I said, you in? Because I know last year you said you wanted to be in. So we got plenty of time. So we'd love Jesse to be there. He's got some really cool products. Glowbox sells, for lack of better words, backlit movie posters. So if you're into that, I've yet to see a better product out there on the market. When I first saw it, it was a home theater tour that I did, I think here locally to me. And I went over to his house. We walked up the stairs and I think there was 4 LED TVs vertical. And I thought they were I thought they were digital. I thought they were LED TVs. They were not. They were posters, backlit, but they were so 3-dimensional, so vibrant in their colors. Phenomenal. So I would love to have Jesse there. Jesse he told me, he said, man, I don't even need a booth. I'm going to bring a trailer. It's like literally he's got the whole showroom in his trailer. Everything's hooked up so you can see it. But I'd love for him to be there. They make LED posters. Frames are based out of Kansas City. Their product is amazing. I 100% agree, Michael. Do me a favor. Reach out to on his website. Say, Jesse, are you coming to M-Wave? I'm going to be there. I want to see you. I want you to represent. It'd be awesome. But we'd love to have him. It's a cool product, but it's called Glowbox. Schmock says, would using 3/4-inch MDF sheets instead of drywall be beneficial to improve soundproofing as it's more dense? The plan is to wrap these MDF sheets in fabric with a beveled edge. I'm not an acoustician, I think is how you pronounce it. It's really hard, to be honest with you, to stop a bass wave, especially low frequencies. So when you've got, I don't care if you got 1.5 inch MDF, when you're talking 10 hertz, 15 hertz, 18 hertz, Jonathan, is that going to stop that wave?
No.
Something's going to get reflected, but it's
the wavelength
seep into your other rooms.
Yeah, the wavelength is so long. Would it be beneficial if you're doing that instead of drywall, like on its face? If you use MDF sheets, green glue MDF sheet, maybe. If it's, I don't know. That's a question to go on an ABS forum and get into those diehard dedicated threads where those guys are like engineering all this kind of thing. That's way past my knowledge level off the cuff to answer.
Yeah. Super quick question. Ace of Base. GSG was there. They weren't there last year. They just sent one of their products. They sent the Dual 21. That thing was a beast. We had it actually in the subwoofer comparison. So that was a lot of fun to experience. Triad, I haven't heard from Triad. So I'm not sure I even have a contact at Triad, but we'd love as many brands that want to be there as possible, because we know that if you can have experience with them at M-Wave firsthand, then you can make a better decision on what works best for you, for your budget, and what products are going to work well. So if there's a favorite brand that you have, we'd love to have them, but feel free to reach out to them as a consumer. Say, hey, I'm going to be attending M-Wave in June, and I'd love for you to be there. Are you guys planning on going? And they may go, well, who is M-Wave? How do we find out more? Then just send them to the website, midwestavexperience.com, and that'll come directly to me as well as Ryan. We'd be glad to get in touch with them and see if it'd be a good fit. But hope you guys can join us as well, June 21st through the 23rd. It's going to be super, super fun. And we've got all kinds of stuff we'll be doing at the show. Side-by-side comparisons, projectors, speakers, subwoofers. We did cables last year, room correction comparison last year. And then we've also got some really, really amazing home theater experiences. Jonathan's one of those. Sheldon, he's been on the show. He's one of those. Chirpy's one of those. He's been on the show. Ryan's one of those. We've got a lot of great ones. I think there's 8 or 9 of them this year, which is up from 3 last year. So we've tripled the amount of home theater experiences for you. So super excited about that. But we'd love for you guys to join us. All right, back to comments.
I'm going to circle back to that CBT thing
Yeah.
and give him a bad answer because Parts Express used to sell two different types. There was a CBT 36 and a smaller variant of that, and they don't sell either one. And I just did some web searching and I didn't find anything like that's replaced it. You can find some do-it-yourself threads on ABS Forum where people are trying to like basically recreate that, because you can still buy the drivers, but the MDF kit with the curved wood and everything, the cutouts, that's not available anymore. It doesn't look like. So you're gonna be on your own. You can find some threads for help. You can find the drivers, but you're on your own to build it.
Okay. Smock says, we got that one. Perfect. Let me uncheck that one. Mike says, Michael, was it worth the 2 months wait? He's talking about my dinner excursion. Yeah. And here's the reason. Was the steak worth $150? Nah. I mean, to me, there's no steak worth that. I had a gift card, so I was blessed, and it covered. We still paid a good amount for the meal and dessert, but we got a $200 gift card. So we're like, man, we're going for it. We're getting a $150 steak. She's getting a $50 steak, and it was great. Was it worth the wait? Absolutely. Because here's the thing, for something like that, it's not like we needed dinner and tonight. I mean, it's like, let's just schedule a date night for 2 months out. And if we've just always tried to, we've always tried to make date nights important. I see just too many families that they forget to do that. And I know this is an audio show, and I know that we're talking home theater, but we've been happily married for a long time now. So I think it's important. So was that important for me and my wife to wait 2 months? Yeah. Heck yeah. Anytime I can spend time. Yes, I am talking about that, Joe, the steakhouse in Tampa called Burns Steakhouse. But yeah, it was worth the wait. And again, you don't have to, they have, I say normal, it's expensive, but you're going to spend $50-$60 on a filet. I think now Outback is probably near that. So it's just a different dining experience. And I think that's really what it is. It's an experience more than just dinner. Wanjo says, I hope I pronounced that right. Maybe Wanyo. I think it's Wanyo. Good evening. What do you guys think about the Projector Dangby? I have never heard of that brand. Mars Pro 4K seems to be a great deal. Budget laser projector, looking to replace my BenQ 1070. I am not familiar with that. Have you even heard of that brand, Jonathan?
Never, but that doesn't mean anything. There's a lot of brands running around.
That's the thing. And especially in the ultra short throw market, they're popping. I get emails every day. It's like, hey, we've got a great ultra short throw projector, and we'd love for you to help us promote it. It's like, I've never heard of you, man. So it's hard to take on those things, because typically I think, this is my personal opinion, a lot of brands are popping up and they're just kind of taking kind of the guts of something, and they're kind of putting their model or their branding on it. Where's Ryan tonight? We talked about that. He is snowboarding and skiing with his family in where'd I say? Not Utah. Tahoe. Lake Tahoe. Lake Tahoe. Mike says, does the Harman curve line up with 85 dB reference for LFE and 75 dB for speakers? Thinking of recalibrating to that.
No, the Harman curve would be on top of that. You're going to have your 75 dB for speakers with a 30 dB offset if you're using like a mainstream receiver. And then you're going to make your bass whatever you want. So you'll put your bass as the receiver calibrates it with the auto EQ practice or with the internal test tones at 85. And then you're going to apply your house curve beyond that. Like it's going to be probably louder in most cases than the 85 dB. I'm looking at that projector that you're talking about, the Dangby thing. It's so hard to judge that kind of stuff without seeing it. It's a DLP. It's a 0.47 DMD chip. That's really common. That's on a lot of DLPs in that price range. DLP's been around unchanged for what, half a dozen years or more at this point. Like with that particular chip, or it's probably kind of a known commodity as far as like being similar to what other things are there in the market, generically speaking, and it's not going to be better than other things in the market, would be my anticipation. So if you see some sort of glowing reviews on YouTube with that, be cautious, because a lot of people, honestly, they get those free, and they get them in free in exchange for a good review. So keep that keep that in your back pocket as you think about whether to buy it.
Cool.
I think recommendation would be to go to a mainstream vendor for support, so it's around in 5 years. You know, has better resale, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Tyler says, would JTR RS1 pair well with the SI HST 18s, which is in a 4 cubic foot box? So RS1 is sealed. HST 18, is that sealed?
So
or does it depend on what you put it in?
That's just a driver. It'd be whatever he puts it in. So is that the $500 version SI stereo integrity?
I don't know. HST 18.
HST 18. Oh, that's $1,000 beastie.
Yeah.
78 millimeter linear travel. That's a beast, actually.
Yeah. They were there last year. That's probably what he brought last year. I think he had the HST 18s. So 2000 watts continuous. Yeah, I mean, look at this magnet on this joker. Holy crap.
That's a serious driver.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
those are
that'll
bad.
pair well. That'd be fine. If you're doing both sealed is kind of like the universal answer to pairing more easily than ported or horns or that kind of thing, because they won't fight each other with phase shifts and that kind of thing. So if you got a nice amp and you're running, you know, with time delays and everything appropriately set by your receiver, you should be fine. That should be fine.
I love these comments. We're still talking steak over here. He's like, you're gonna get ringworm or some kind of worms eating, you know, medium rare steak. I'm like, dude, I've eaten medium rare all my life. What's up, Don? Good to see you, buddy. He's been playing around and he's working, not playing. He's working on his theater room. Super glad you're working on that. I want to do your home theater tour, dude. Let's get on it. Let me get down there. By the end of 2024, I'd love to do your home theater tour. So let's make it happen. He's working it. Reginald says, given the choice, Perlison R in walls or Martin Logan Monument in walls. Man, interesting. I don't think I've heard the Monuments. I did hear it was the Perlison. It wasn't the R series, I don't think. I think it was the S series. I just did Matthew Pose. If you look up my home theater tour, Matthew Pose, phenomenal setup. Most of the time in walls, I haven't been too impressed with, to be honest with you. But I mean, they're good. They sound fine, but I've never walked away going, oh my gosh, like I was blown away. His is a phenomenal system. It really, really is. And it's all in walls, even the front LCR. But again, I haven't heard the Perlison R in walls, so I can't really give you a whole lot of advice on that or the Martin Logan Monuments. I'm just not familiar with those. Charlie, Jonathan, why do you stack 4 subs high, man? That is looking kind of crazy, ridiculous. What kind of testing are you doing there, brother?
So,
let me make you big here. Oh, he's still got them. Let me move your
hole in the way, and I don't know how to fix it. But there's
That's
4
okay.
here, and there's
another 4 on the left.
That's right.
There you go. Ooh, look at that. That looks pretty.
Flanking my screen left and right. Just trying something different, man. I've never had them stacked 4 high that way, and I was getting ready to get rid of directional bass because that turned out to be a dud. And I just thought I'll try the stacked version and see how it goes. I'll tell you this: at first glance, it's way better than directional bass, just out of the cuff, and it doesn't measure as well. But there's a feel to it, a tactile feel that's stronger than having the directional bass. So immediately, my daughter, when we hooked this up, she's like, "You got to keep this, Dad. And then you got to buy more subs for behind the seats and near field." So it does feel like a stronger energy, and I think there's something to like the science of it as being like kind of a single plane that the bass is coming from. It's not coming from different places in the room. It's a single plane that kind of washes over you. So interesting. It's fun to play with. I don't know if I'm going to keep it that way, but it's just experimenting.
You've been hanging out with Sheldon. He's got 4 stacks like that in his house.
Yes, he does.
Insane, dude. Some of you guys are going to get, and he still has room on his. Let me pull this up super quick. If you guys want to, if you've never experienced like stupid, crazy bass, Jonathan's room is full. But if you go to, we got some really cool home theaters here. So if you go to midwestaviexperience.com, put your mouse over attend and come down to home theater experiences. So there's like 8 or 9 of them here. So Ryan's is fully booked. Jonathan is fully booked. Sheldon, I'm sorry, this is Ivan's here. Sheldon's right here is almost full for these 2 time slots. And he's got a couple extra spots here. But when you click on the more info and look at it, you can see there's a stack here in the back corner. There's 2 in the front.
Mhm.
And then I think there's another 2 photos back here showing. Yeah, there's the stack there before he, finished them.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
There's other stacks. 16 18s, and how many 12s was it? Like 32?
Okay,
No,
so
how many 12s do you have?
So when you go to the website, his equipment list is here. So, and he just updated this. He's now at a 9-channel bed layer, 16
18s,
18s, and then 4 Atmos.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually doesn't even include his
okay,
so look right here. Yeah, he's got 18 12-inch. Some of them are literally attached to the back of the seat. Some of them are in the riser underneath the seats. And he now has a 24-inch. So I don't even think that's right then. Maybe
it is right. He's built. Was it 21 or
17? So it needs to be 17 because he's got 16 18s and yes, that, oh my gosh, I need to update.
To be fair, I don't think that he ordered it. It's in, and he's getting the cabinet built by a local guy named Doug, but I don't think it's installed yet. It's in progress. Like, that's something, a new addition for you guys.
Yeah, man. Oh yeah, Doug's building it. He's
Doug's
awesome,
building the box. Yeah,
Doug's got
he builds a lot of the boxes
around here, dude. Oh my gosh, yeah, his system is crazy too. All you guys are on another level. If y'all haven't experienced crazy systems, man, come to Kansas City, come to M-Wave. There's plenty of, and there's, like I said, there's like 8 or 9 awesome home theaters, all completely different. So you may look at one and go, I've been interested in that speaker or those subwoofers or tactile or transducers or whatever. A lot of great experiences there. Boom, that's a good question. Okay, can Steve use his omnidirectional podcast mic with REW? A podcast mic? Probably not, because he's probably talking about a cardioid, I think is maybe the term for the mic.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to have a calibration file with that. I'm not sure how accurate it's going to be.
I wouldn't try it, Steve. Stick with what works. I know it's tempting to use what we have, but that'd be like me going, hey, could I use this for REW? It's not meant for that. It's meant for what we're doing right here. Podcast.
Yeah, and sometimes they're actually enhancing some of like the male or female vocal ranges, so it's not going to be
making me sound sexy.
They are.
Okay, not really. All right, Chris says, how does the house curve impact audio visual experience in a home theater setup? Oh, great question. So to me, it gives you more of that tactile feel. Mm-hmm. If you have it flat, you're probably not going to, it's just not as exciting. Now, can you have too much of a good thing? Maybe. But again, that's where you play with preference. Give it enough to where you're like, ooh, I like that. And that's where a good house curve is. SRW 1000, there's less need for a high house curve on the low end if you also use BEQ. So if he's using bass EQ, would you still use a house curve? Do some people do that?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to subjectivity again, but BEQ is basically taking away or trying to remove the filter that studios are applying to protect pro audio subwoofers in the theater. So sometimes they're not remixed for home, and a lot of movie theaters roll off at 30 hertz hard because the driver's port tuned there, and they don't want to damage drivers. So the movie studios put this high-pass filter to eliminate, it's also known as a low-cut filter, to eliminate the lowest frequencies. And BEQ is uniquely per movie taking that filter and reversing it to try to make the bass flat down to DC. Mixed results on whether you like that or not. Sheldon uses it. I kind of don't use it. I don't know. Have you played with it, Michael? Like BEQ?
I haven't played with it in my system. I've heard it at Jerry's system. Mm-hmm. I remember he turned it on and off, and it wasn't like, some people will claim, man, you're like missing out. This is game changer set. I don't get that impression at all.
So you heard it at Sheldon's, and let me make the connection for you.
Okay.
Do you remember when I think during the demo when Magneto put his helmet on, And do you remember with Sheldon's Boss setup, how we were doing this in the movie screen? And it was just because his helmet was on. That was because of BEQ. BEQ boosted that low frequency that was there subtly in the movie that you wouldn't really feel with regular subs, and it amplified it because it's hover easy, like you're on those inner tubes bouncing. And it was like a arcade ride or something.
Yeah.
Odd.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I've not been a fan of BEQ, but that's just me. But there are a lot of guys that love it. And again, a lot of this hobby is subjective. So as far as how do you play with it, you can load those into REW. I think the HTP, I'm sorry, not REW, mini DSP. The HTP1 now has, I think in their web interface, they've got an option on there. You can load the BEQ. And basically you would have to go and download that file for that movie, load that file. But it definitely gets kind of tricky because let's say you forget to
unload
that file. Now you're watching something else and it's totally, it could be EQ and some really funky stuff. So, but again,
oops, sorry, saying how do you play with it? You need a mini DSP in its root form if you don't have the HTTP1. And then you just apply it. Like you download that filter, you apply it per movie.
Yeah. And it's just adding some kind of like you said, it's EQ system. So SRW 1000, try using BEQ on the final movie First Man, and you'll be able to tell the difference right away. The HTTP1 imports the file automatically, and that's cool to know. And it deletes it when you switch inputs. Problem for me is I don't switch. Well, I guess I do switch inputs from PS5 to, so okay.
That's pretty cool. That's nice that they've done all that tailoring to the customers.
But if you don't remember to switch EQ, like let's say you've got your 4K player and that's what you use, or you got it hooked up through your HTPC, your computer, and your Zidu or any of that stuff. So yeah. He said, "Oh, I clicked on the wrong thing." This is kind of funny tying in with that. He says there was a oopsie. Here we go. There was a Rice Krispie Treats commercial where they obviously forgot the low cutoff. That commercial was an old lady and the kid will break your windows.
I want to know more about that. I haven't ever heard about that one. That sounds like
imagine doing that at your next crawl. You're like, guys, you got to check out this demo.
This Rice Krispie Treat commercial.
It's like, all right, we're gonna wrap it up here in the next probably 6 questions. Josh, 30 hertz.
We spoke to that one already.
Okay, perfect. No problem. Tarhoya, with Arc Genesis, you can do it with deep bass boost. We talked about that. What would you gentlemen say is the best room correction? Direct, I think it means direct, like direct live. Odyssey, Anthem room correction was it ARC? Man, so that's so subjective. I've been using the Marantz AV7706 in my setup. It's Odyssey XT32. Dude, I love the way my system sounds. I've got the Anthem AVR 70, so I need to play with that. A lot of people love direct live. So I think to me, it's not so much like which is better. Part of me thinks, and correct me if I'm wrong, and Odyssey is changing a little bit. So Odyssey used to be just super simple, kind of plug and play, put the microphone where you're supposed to, let it run. It does its thing. And you don't have to change a whole lot. And it kind of does its thing. Now you can change crossover. You can change your levels, which I recommend level matching. You have to spend $20 to get the app, and that lets you change, like turn on and off mid-range compensation. Earlier, we were talking about that curtain, being able to cut off how much, like what frequencies Odyssey is correcting for. So you can do things like that. You can add kind of like a house curve. The EQ is kind of funky especially on a mobile or a tablet, but it does have some flexibility. And then if you want to take it a step further, they have the new Odyssey, run you about $200. You can get it on sale. Black Friday, what was it down to?
$150.
So you can get that. And what is that called? Multi-EQX?
Multi-EQX.
Okay. So you can get that, and that gives you a lot more flexibility on what you can do, kind of more granular control. But in the past, Odyssey was kind of like the easiest. and then probably Anthem, and then Direct Live. So part of it to me depends on like how much time do you want to involve? You know, are you the casual guy that you're one of those that likes to kind of set it, forget it? You're not really a tinkerer. Odyssey may do everything you need. I don't know, Jonathan, what are your thoughts on that? You've probably played with all of those. You've been to various theaters that support all of those
Yeah,
room
I mean, without,
corrections.
this could be a 2-hour discussion from my perspective.
So give us a
So
cliff
much
notes.
variance, and I'll give you a cliff note version here. The bundled microphone that you get with these auto EQs is plus or minus 3 dB difference, just mass manufactured. There's no cal file. That's your entry point. So even if your processor is reliably tuning to the EQ curve that the manufacturer wants you to have, the mass manufactured bundled mic that's stuck in there can screw it up, because it could be plus 6 dB hotter than the next one off the line at a certain frequency. That's real. Like, I've measured that with Odyssey mics, 2 or 3 Odyssey mics. They measure as much as 5 dB different in my experience. And the plus or minus 2.5 is in their sedated specs for Odyssey. Same thing for other vendors. So that's at the gate. Now we're talking about, they all have their own little proprietary curves that they've developed through their own testing that they want to apply. It's not always just flat. Did you hit the mark? Did you pick good spots with the microphones? So what I'm saying is, I don't know that you could have a preference on a particular unit, because I don't think it's reliable between room to room to speaker to speaker to setup. So you might have a preference in this room, and if you go to Michael's room, you might have a different preference. At the end of the day, I just like doing, and I won't harp on this, but I just like doing the auto EQ because it's reliable. I know what I'm getting. And
say that again, Jonathan, because it sounded like you said you like doing auto EQ.
Manual EQ. Did I said that wrong?
Yeah.
Freudian slip.
Make sure that.
Yeah, I just like doing a manual EQ. I let the auto EQ run to set up distances and to set up trims, and then double check the SPL level, make sure it's accurate, and then I turn it off. And that's been my preference for every auto EQ that I've run as I've kind of come around on this. And the truth be told, seat to seat variance is much less when you do that. That's been my experience. So if you care about more than one seat, that's another reason to turn off auto EQ. But teach their own. You know, if you like what it does in your room and you primarily care about the main listening position, go for it. Good.
So one thing that is challenging, and I'm learning over the years, is it's easy for somebody to buy, let's say they had an Odyssey, and then they buy something with Direct Live. And then a lot of times you'll hear guys say, oh my gosh, you know, this thing transformed my whole system. The reality is yes, you've been listening to your Odyssey. Let's say you had it for 5 years or 3 years, and you know how that sounds, if that's possible. But then you unhook let's say your Denon or your Marantz, then you put in the whatever that has Direct Live, and you calibrate it, or you have ARC and you calibrate it, and then you listen to it again, and you're like, now I'm hearing the differences. How much time has separated between when you were listening with Odyssey and when you were listening with Direct Live or ARC or Lingdor, Room Perfect, or whatever? I would venture to say that there's at least 30 minutes in between there to set up. I'm saying like bare minimum, right?
Sure.
Let's say 30 minutes an hour. Can you effectively remember precisely the differences you heard from an hour ago to now?
No.
And that's challenging, guys. I mean, that's our audio memory, I'm learning, is really not as great as we think it is. So to be able to listen to something, even speakers, and that's why I hate it when people say, Michael, you've heard the Martin Logan 60X Ti. How did those compare with the new F200s that you've got in your house now? I'll be honest, I can't tell you. The only way I can do that effectively is if I did some fast switching. That's about the only way to do it. So to be able to say, well, this one, I remember 2 years ago, the mid-range was kind of tilted and kind of sparkly, or whatever adjectives I'm using, you really just can't do that. So I try to stay away from that. But anyway,
I want to do a real quick illustration. I have 4 Odyssey mics here. This isn't even going to focus in very well, but there's 4 Odyssey mics here.
Okay, yeah.
One is for a 5508 Onkyo. One is for a 4520 Denon. One is for a AV10,
Mhm.
and one of them is for what's the one I'm missing? 7200, I think it was.
Okay.
When I had my Onkyo 5508, I didn't ever like Odyssey. Like I couldn't get it the way I liked it. I moved to a Denon 4520, and all of a sudden I liked Odyssey, and I still had both receivers. And I was
Mhm.
thinking, like, well, all right, what's changed? It's the same version of Odyssey. Like, what's the
Right.
difference? So this brought me down this path. I went ahead and used the 4520 microphone, happenstance, random off the
Right.
assembly line microphone with the
Uh-huh.
Onkyo. All of a sudden,
Okay.
I'm like, wait a minute, now I like the Onkyo's Odyssey. So I
Mm.
pulled
Wow.
out OmniMic, and I started measuring these mics, and there was a 5 dB difference in the treble between those two mics.
Oh,
So
wow.
5 dB is not insignificant, right? You pump your treble at 5 dB. That was my whole
Sure.
problem with the
Go here.
Onkyo. I always thought the treble's too bright with this. You
Mm.
can't. That's not something that the vendor's even controlling.
Yeah.
So I've got what I call my golden mic, if you will. It's this Denon 4520 microphone, and it sounds good to my ears. Like it just
That's
happens
your
to match my
reference.
treble. Yeah. So like
Cheesy
this, I just,
microphone.
even though it's 10 years old at this point, I just use it for all my receivers with Odyssey because
Mm.
because I like the way it comes out if I'm going to use Odyssey. So
Yeah.
that puts a nail on it, right? Like you can understand that because same exact version, I care or don't
Mhm.
care for it based on the mic it got luckily included or didn't, Bummer.
I get it, man.
So Ian's pointing out that Odyssey does sell a calibrated mic, so that's always true. You can go that route with the newer Denon and Marantz receivers and get a calibrated mic, and then put your calibration file in there, and it will give you a
Now,
more
is it the same style?
exact same style, but it's just got a
Okay.
cal file with it, so it's not, you don't have that lottery from the.
And how do you load that with their web interface?
I believe so. I've never done it, but that's what I read. Is that
I didn't know you could do that. Interesting.
It's not cheap. What is it? I
Really?
think is it $80 or something?
Okay. But it's the same mic, but they have a calibration file for
Yeah,
that.
I mean that's basically the difference. It's going to be the same exact like piece of equipment, just they give you a cal file so you know that it's accurate.
I wonder what's the tolerance on that. If it's 5 dB tolerance on, is it down to 2? Is it 3? Or is it
That's a great
accurate? I
question.
don't know.
Great question.
Pedro says, do you recommend connecting the subwoofer with a Y splitter to a right and left input, or just L, which is LFE? Great question, man. So this is interesting. So what is your experience? I'll tell you mine.
If it has an LFE input, then I would just use LFE. A lot of times people like combining them because it gives you an extra 3 dB or so on the volume. It makes it louder, but there's not. Sometimes the amplifier, if it has an LFE labeled, is actually made to just have that alone. So you're going to be less likely to clip or something, but it's not that big of a deal one way or the other, really.
Some of the old, and I don't remember what it was, but some of the older subwoofers, so when you're buying used, of course, back then they didn't have an LFE channel. It was always a
left and
red,
right.
yeah,
Correct.
it's a red and white. I never understood that. This is a mono speaker, but you're feeding it a stereo, but you got a mono signal coming from the AVR. Like, why? I never understood that. But I found out that some subwoofers almost like require you to use both for some reason. It had something to do with the voltage or whatever, just the way that they engineered it and designed it. So most case, yeah, if you've got the LFE, just make it simple. Single RCA, a digital coax cable, that would work too. Come out of the AVR, go straight into the subwoofer. So I think that's the easiest thing. No need for a splitter. But like I said, just that caveat on some of the older ones, at least from the manufacturer, they said, no, we really recommend you do a Y because we've engineered it that way. I went, okay. Last couple questions, 2 questions here. Dwayne Harris says, I have a PB 1000 Pro, so that's from SVS. So he's got 2 of those, dual subs. I use a wireless connection. So they sell like a wireless adapter so that you don't have to run a RCA cable all the way to the subwoofers. Do I need to recalibrate my room? And how do you calibrate dual subs? I have a Marantz SR 5014. So I'm assuming he's saying he had wires to him. Now he's going wireless. So he hasn't moved the subwoofers in a different location. Does he still need to recalibrate that? And would that have to do with like distance, time, or not distance, but delay. We talked about that in a previous show that sometimes these have.
He absolutely has to do that again because his delays will be wrong. The distance settings will be wrong since the wireless thing adds latency.
Okay. That makes
Now
sense.
I'm looking to see if that unit is an actual, if I can find it in quick order, if that's dual sub output, or if it's just like a Y splitter on the back of the unit.
I'm pretty sure. Well, I haven't reviewed the PB1000, so I better not say that. SVS PB1000.
No, I'm talking about the Marantz product. So, like, is it a Y splitter on the Marantz and it's just one subwoofer, or is it doing two separate subwoofer outs?
Oh, SR5014. I'm sorry. SR. Yeah. That's hard to, like, internally. And it may only have one anyway. So he may have to use a Y on there. Let me see if I can find a photo.
It does say it has two subwoofer outs. If your speaker level trims, like if you go into speakers and then you go to levels and you have a subwoofer 1 and a subwoofer 2, then it does have dual control over it and there are different distances and stuff. You would want to use that if you can versus a Y, any kind of Y splitter.
You know, though, thinking about that, Jonathan, I'll have to go back into my Marantz. In the distances, does it have a distance for well, I guess it would have to. Distance for 1 and 2. Okay. I've just never really gone back and really checked my distances. I just let Odyssey take care of that. All right. Last question here. Before we go, man, Jonathan, I'm serious, man. You're just a wealth of knowledge. And I say that to you and Ryan all the time. The amount of experience that you bring to the AV community is just tremendous. It really, really is. And so I appreciate you, brother, man, your friendship. We have a lot of fun on the AV experience. So hope you guys enjoy this. So we got one more question here. Again, we've got M-Wave happening June 21st through the 23rd. We'd love to have you there. We got general tickets as well as VIP home theater experiences at MidwestAVExperience.com. Love to have you join us. Last question of the night comes from Margaret. Hey guys, wanted to know what the better choice is between the Cinema 50 and the Onkyo. Man, we seem like we get this question almost every week too.
Yeah.
So Sheldon had the RZ50, correct?
Correct. And he just recently upgraded to the 6800.
Okay. I knew he had changed, but I wasn't sure what model.
Because he wanted more channels. That was the reason he upgraded. The RZ50 is limited to 11, 6800 is 13.
So the new RZ50, it does have the direct live, I believe, correct?
It's the RZ50 has the Dirac built in. The Cinema 50 you have to pay for it.
Okay. So room correction, they both have identical. Now Cinema 50 could also do
a caveat. The RZ50 has like the baby Dirac without the bass correction, right? Okay. It's like the $300 option.
Okay.
The Cinema 50 you're buying it, but you can buy the bass module too, I think.
Interesting. Okay, so what are your thoughts on that though? I mean, differences?
Sheldon was real happy with that RZ50. He said it was reliable, didn't have any bugs in his experience, and it's $1,000 total. That's not a bad way to go. Cinema 50 is going to be a really reliable product too, but you're going to pay more for it out of the gate, and if you want Dirac, you're going to pay another $300.
Yeah.
The price could almost be double difference, maybe. What's that Cinema 50 cost? Let me look that up real quick.
You look that up, and I'll look up the RZ50. Onkyo RZ50.
Cinema 50 is $2,500.
So 25 versus on Crutchfield 11 or $1,200.
Yeah, double the price. There's a little bit of a question mark with. I bet you that the Marantz Cinema 50 is going to have better power. The RZ50 has basically a limiter that engages for the rear channels, and it doesn't do very much power at all. Probably okay for most cinemas, like those small theaters where you're not trying to go to reference volume. But if the products from Marantz and the Denon products in their upper echelon like this, they have a 70% rating. They will supply at least 70% power for the channels driven, and I don't think the Onkyo is doing that in this particular instance. It might drop as low as like 20 or 30 watts actually for the surround channels.
Yeah, Dell said he's been eyeing that RZ50 so much, man. He said it actually AMZ. What's AMZ?
Amazon.
Oh, wow. I've just never abbreviated Amazon. The Amazon has has it as low as $10.99. Sometimes you can get it on sale. So I think they're both great products. I'm glad to see Onkyo finally coming back in, because for so long, so many years, Onkyo was the best bang for the buck. I mean, they gave you all of the bells and whistles. You got all of the codecs, and it was just reliable. It was great. And then for a while, I think it was when they removed Odyssey and they went to their own room correction. That's when we just never heard from them. It was
Dolby
like,
EQ.
yeah, it was like funky. And maybe people would buy it and go, well, this sounds like doo-doo. Maybe they didn't like it. And so we just never heard from Onkyo. So to see them back in the game, I'm really excited about that. So I'm grateful. Because again, the more options that we have as consumers, I think the better, because it drives, that competition drives the other brand to do better than that brand. And then now this brand has to up their game to do better than that brand. And so it continually increases and raises the bar, and we get ultimately, hopefully, a better product and hopefully lower prices, because they're trying to compete for the market.
So what do you think in your gut? What would you go with on that?
Here's the thing. For me, I mean, I've owned Denon and I've owned Marantz, and like you said, they're rock solid. I've had the I've had a Marantz SR8012 in for review. I had the SR8015 that I owned. I went to the AV7705, rock solid, AV7706, and literally I turn it on every single time. It works. I don't have any glitches. I don't have any weird quirks. I don't have any workarounds or bugs. It's just solid. And that's one thing I really, really appreciate about Denon and Marantz. So is Gramani going to be at M-Wave? We have been in talks. So don't have any confirmation yet, but I've been in talks with him as well as Brent Borkist. I hope I pronounced his name right. So he's helping Anthony with some marketing, and he would love to have, he was trying to get there last year. It was funny. We're a month out and he's like, I think we could swing it. And I'm like, how? Like, how are you going to pack together a whole room? Shows, when you're trying to build out a full Dolby Atmos system, that's a big deal. So he's like, yeah, we probably can't do it. But he got excited for a minute. So we may see him at M-Wave 2024, but don't know. So I'm continually reaching out to brands saying, hey guys, following up with you, checking in. And a lot of them literally, they just finished CES, which CES honestly is probably the biggest show they go to, that and CEDIA. And these guys spend, some of them $500,000 on their booth. It's crazy. Some of them even spend more than that if they have to build their own booth, build their own, room, and they fly it in from, overseas, from Officina Acustica. They designed it like at CEDIA. So it's been really, really crazy. But and M-Wave is just a new thing. So they're trying to figure out, is this going to be a good fit for our brand? It's different for them to be consumer facing products or consumer facing shows. They're used to things like CEDIA, which is dealers. So it's kind of a different clientele for them. So we're excited. We're pumped up, but yeah, we'd love to have Gramani. He makes a great product, and had a super awesome home theater set up at CEDIA. So Jonathan, as always, man, we have a blast. Super grateful for you. Ryan will be back with us probably next week. He and his family were on a ski trip. So wish them the best. Enjoy some family time together. So guys, hope you, let me throw this in. So we do now have the podcast on both Spotify as well as Apple. So it'll probably take a couple more days in addition than normal for this episode to get uploaded, because Ryan does that. But anyway, hope you guys have an awesome week. We'll take care, and we'll catch you in the next stream.
Thanks, guys.